You remember the smell before you remember the store. Roasted peanuts by the front door. Floor wax. The faint sweetness of the candy case and popcorn turning in a glass machine. Your mother knew the woman at the register by name. The man at the counter had worked there 30 years. And he remembered your size. Every town had these stores. They anchored Main Street, they anchored downtown, and for most of a century they anchored Saturday itself. Then they went. Not all at once. One at a time, quietly, until a whole way of shopping and a whole way of being together in public was simply gone. Nobody voted to end any of this. But it ended. These are 15 of the stores your family knew by heart. Count them down with us and see how many you walk through with your own 2 feet. Start singing it. You still can. When the values go up, 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 and the prices go down, down, down. Robert Hall wasn't fancy, and that was the whole idea. Founded in Waterbury, Connecticut in 1937 by a businessman named Jacob Schwab, who invented the name Robert Hall out of thin air. The chain put suits on pipe racks in plain warehouse rooms with bright fluorescent light and no decoration at all. Low overhead. That was the pitch, and it was true. A working father could walk in before a wedding or a court date or a first job interview and walk out with a suit, alterations included. One Dallas man put it simply. Robert Hall made it possible for him to have dress clothes to wear on dates. At its peak, the chain ran 367 stores in 36 states. When every competitor moved production overseas in the 70s, Robert Hall stayed loyal to its American factories. It kept its tailors, and it bled. In July of 1977, the parent company went bankrupt and every single store closed. The company that dressed the working man died, in part, because it kept making his clothes at home. In 1946, 2 brothers home from the Navy, Herbert and Sidney Hubschman, got hold of a batch of surplus televisions and sold them off a vacant lot in Harrison, New Jersey. They sold out in hours. The business they built from that lot was called Two Guys, and if you grew up in the Northeast, you can hear the jingle now. We save money for you at Two Guys. Naturally. Two Guys was a blue-collar palace, 100,000 square feet in some locations, with groceries at one end and hardware at the other, pinball machines, Italian ice stands, and in the Dover store, an actual miniature bowling alley with real pins. It grew past 100 stores. Then the money men noticed something the shoppers never thought about. The land under those enormous stores was worth more than the stores themselves. A real estate investor took control, and by February of 1982, every Two Guys was gone. The company lives on today, but not as a store. It became a real estate trust. The name was Yiddish. Sehr gut, very good. Max and Morris Feldberg, 2 brothers from Russia, built the company, and their cousins Stanley and Sumner opened the first Zayre discount store in Hyannis, Massachusetts on September 20th, 1956. You remember the popcorn smell at the door? You remember the flashing light specials called out over the loudspeaker, and shoppers actually running. One Chicago customer remembered the checkout lights glowing white and orange like a creamsicle. Zayre put toys, clothes, records, and layaway plans within reach of families who counted every dollar, and in the weeks before Christmas it did something almost no other store in America did. It stayed open 24 hours a day. Somewhere in a box in your basement there may still be a pillowcase or a hula hoop with a Zayre price sticker on it. By 1988 the stores were tired and losing money, and the company sold all of them. roughly 392 stores, to Ames. Here's the part almost nobody knows. Zayre itself never really died. It changed its name to TJX. If you have shopped at TJ Maxx, you have shopped at what Zayre became. If you grew up in New York, your mother dragged you through Alexander's, and you either loved it or you hated it. And either way, you never forgot it. Founded in the Bronx in 1928 by George Farkas, who named it for his late father, Alexander's sold copies of designer fashion at prices a Fordham Road family could actually pay. The flagship at Fordham Road and the Grand Concourse was at one point in the 30s doing higher sales per square foot than any store in the United States. The Paramus store wore a crown. A mural by the Polish artist Stefan Knapp, 200 feet long, 50 feet high, 280 panels of baked enamel on steel. For years it was called the largest mural in the world. The chain peaked at 16 stores in 1981. Then Macy's and Bloomingdale's squeezed from above, Kmart squeezed from below, and on May 15th, 1992, the last 11 stores closed and 5,000 people lost their jobs. The Manhattan flagship block is now the Bloomberg Tower. The mural survived. Pieces of it hang today at a hospital in Paramus. Murphy's was the 5 and dime with the oiled wooden floors. People who grew up with one described the same two things in the same breath. The creak of those dark floors and the popcorn machine you could smell from the sidewalk. George Clinton. Murphy opened the first store in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, in 1906, and McKeesport stayed home for the company its entire life. Murphy's was where a child's allowance went. Candy weighed out on a scale from the glass case, comic books, parakeets, and goldfish in the back, records and cheap portable record players that pulled teenagers in like a magnet. The lunch counter served what one West Virginia woman swore were the best club sandwiches anywhere. During the Depression, the company made a point of never laying off a single employee. It grew to 545 stores by 1976. Then came the discount giants, then a buyout by Ames in 1985, then a handoff to McCrory, then bankruptcy, and by 2002, it was all over. Somewhere along the way, nobody could say exactly when, the popcorn machines went cold. Grant's is the one the business schools still teach, and not kindly. William Thomas Grant opened his first 25-cent store in Lynn, Massachusetts in 1906 with $1,000 of savings. For 60 years it worked. Nearly 1,200 stores at the peak. Toys and yo-yos and squirt guns up front, tropical fish burbling in the back, and the Bradford House restaurant with its pilgrim mascot, Bucky Bradford, serving fried clam dinners to families on Saturday. Then, in 1969, someone at headquarters had an idea. Give every customer credit. No credit check, no questions. Each store kept its own books, so a man could open an account at 6 different Grants around the city, and none of them would know about the others. When the economy turned, the debts came due, and nobody could collect them. In October of 1975, W.T. Grant filed for bankruptcy, owing more than $1 billion. At the time, the second largest retail collapse in American history. The stores were gone within the year. A century of nickels and dimes, undone by easy credit in 6 years. First, the legend. You may have been told the name stood for 8 Jewish-Korean war veterans. It never did. The company started in 1948, 2 years before Korea, in a 400-square-foot loft in Manhattan. E. for Eugene Fairclough, J for his friend Joe Zwillenberg. Korvette from the Korvette, the small fast warship. Korvettes sold at 30 to 40% below list price when that was barely legal, and America beat a path to it. If you were a teenager in the 60s, you knew exactly why you went. The record department, open bins, every genre, weekly sales. In 1964 alone, Korvette sold $20 million worth of records. In Baltimore, they still tell how Sinatra's bins emptied the week his albums went 50 cents off. 58 stores at the height. Then the founder was pushed out. The company chased fashion instead of bargains, and a French conglomerate closed the last 17 stores on Christmas Eve, 1980. Christmas Eve. One employee wrote, decades later, at age 91, "If Korvettes were still in business, I would still be working there." Altman's did not shout. On Fifth Avenue at 34th Street stood a limestone palazzo with marble fountains in the foyer, opened in 1906 by Benjamin Altman, a merchant who collected Rembrandts and left them all to the Metropolitan Museum. Inside it was quiet, wood paneling, crystal chandeliers, clerks who took a customer by the arm and knew the stock like their own bookshelves. Upstairs on the 8th floor was Charleston Gardens, a restaurant built around the full-size facade of a southern mansion, where grandmothers in hats and gloves lunched beneath painted garden murals. Regulars joked that you did not eat there without blue-rinsed hair and support hose. Altman survived 124 years on quality and courtesy. What killed it was not Walmart. It was an Australian property developer named George Herscu, who bought control in 1987, knowing nothing about retail, loaded the company with his ambitions, and drove it into bankruptcy by August of 1989. The last store closed in January of 1990. The building still stands. The gentility went with the store. Here is a riddle. What store died and killed its own killer? Sebastian Kresge opened his dime store empire from Woodward Avenue in Detroit in 1899. Kresge's was the red and white storefront with the popcorn machine working its siren song at the door. 15,000 items on open counters you could actually touch. Comic book racks, hamsters, and little turtles in the pet department, and a lunch counter where former workers remember grilled cheese for a dime and banana splits for 30 cents. By 1958, there were 700 Kresge stores. Then, in March of 1962, in Garden City, Michigan, the company opened a bigger kind of store and gave it a shorter name, Kmart. The child ate the parent. In 1977, the whole corporation renamed itself Kmart, and the last Kresge dime stores were sold off and closed by 1987. You know the rest. The same discount wave Kresge started eventually drowned Kmart too. The old man never saw it. He died in 1966 at 99, one of the last men in America who remembered selling everything for a dime. Before the store, there was the book. Aaron Montgomery Ward invented the mail-order catalog in Chicago in 1872, and for 50 years, farm families called that catalog the wish book and read it like scripture. The stores came later, green awnings in 600 towns by the 50s, tires for your father, jewelry for your mother, and a little lunchroom in between. And Montgomery Ward gave America something bigger than any store. In 1939, a young copywriter named Robert May, a widower raising his daughter alone, was told to write a Christmas giveaway booklet. He wrote about a reindeer with a shiny red nose. Ward gave away 2.4 million copies of Rudolph that first season, free to children visiting the stores. Think about that. Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, was a department store promotion. The catalog died in 1985. A leveraged buyout buried the company in debt. Walmart and Target did the rest, and after one last disappointing Christmas, Montgomery Ward announced its closing in December of 2000. 37,000 people lost their jobs. Does Macy's tell Gimbels? Your parents said it when they meant mind your own business. And the whole country understood, because the rivalry between those two stores was famous enough to carry a movie. Miracle on 34th Street runs on it. Gimbels stood a block from Macy's in Herald Square, 27 acres of selling floor with subway doors that opened straight into the store. And here's the fact Philadelphia never lets New York forget. The first Thanksgiving parade in America was not Macy's. It was Gimbels in Philadelphia in 1920. 50 employees, a few dozen Model T Fords, and Santa Claus riding to the 8th floor toy department 4 years before Macy's ever marched. Kids played hide-and-seek in the round clothing racks while their mothers shopped, and everybody walked across the great glass clock set into the floor. Gimbels ran 53 stores at its height in 1965. A tobacco conglomerate bought it, decided it was a marginal performer, and shut the whole thing down in 1987. Macy's finally got the last word, and it was silence. Give the lady what she wants. That was Marshall Field's motto, and for 150 years, Chicago wanted Fields. The State Street store filled an entire city block under a Tiffany ceiling made from over 1.5 million pieces of glass, the largest ever built. You met under the great corner clock, everyone did, and at Christmas you waited in line for a table in the walnut room beside a tree that rose through the whole 2-story dining room, eating Mrs. Herring's chicken pot pie from a recipe that started in the tea room in 1890. The green Fields bag with Frango mints inside was a gift that needed no card. The candy was made on the 13th floor of the store itself for 70 years. Fields was never bankrupt. It was simply consumed, sold with its parent to May for over $3 billion, swallowed again by Federated, and on September 9th, 2006, the name came off the building and Macy's went up. Chicagoans protested under the clock. A year later, they came back and protested again. Some of them still will not say the new name out loud. Meet me at the Eagle. If you are from Philadelphia, that sentence is a whole map. The Bronze Eagle, 2,500 pounds, 6,600 hand-placed feathers, has stood in the Grand Court of Wanamakers since 1911, and generations of mothers gave children one instruction downtown: if you get lost, go to the Eagle. John Wanamaker opened his store in 1861 and gave American retail the price tag itself, one fixed price for every customer, a Quaker's idea of fairness. Above the Grand Court, he installed the largest playable pipe organ on earth, 28,750 pipes played twice a day, every day. From 1955, the Christmas light show ran on the hour, and children packed the balcony rails on every floor, Rudolph and Frosty, drawn in light bulbs 6 stories tall. In 1995, the name came down after 134 years. The organ still plays in the building. The store it was built for is gone, and when one longtime shopper heard the news, she just started crying on the phone. Say the words 5, And dime, and you have already said Woolworths. Frank Woolworth failed twice before the Lancaster. Pennsylvania store took hold in June of 1879, and from that one storefront came nearly 3,000 stores, the red sign on every main street in America, and a skyscraper in Manhattan that he paid for in cash. The lunch counter was the town square with stools, waitresses in white who knew your order, the smell of grilled cheese and coffee, kids spinning until a parent's hand landed on their shoulder. And it was at a Woolworth's lunch counter in Greensboro, North Carolina, on February 1st, 1960, that 4 college freshmen sat down, ordered coffee, were refused, and stayed. Their sit-in helped change the country. That counter is in a museum now, and it earned the place. On July 17th, 1997, the company announced it was closing its last 400 American stores. 117 years, over in a press release. The corporation survives to this day. You know it as Foot Locker. Detroit did not have a department store. Detroit had Hudson's, and Hudson's had Detroit. 25 floors on Woodward Avenue, 410 feet, the tallest department store in the world. 51 elevators with brass gates, operators calling out the floors. 705 fitting rooms. 5 restaurants serving 10,000 meals a day, Morey salad, and Canadian cheese soup on the 13th floor. Every Armistice Day, the store hung a flag 7 stories tall down the Woodward face, so big it took 55 men to hang it. It is in the Smithsonian now. Hudson's Thanksgiving parade began in 1924, and for Michigan children, Christmas began the moment Santa stepped off the last float to take the key to the city. In 1960, the downtown store hired a high school girl as its first black bus girl. Her name was Diana Ross. The flagship closed on January 17th, 1983. For 15 years, the building stood empty over the city that loved it. Then, on October 24th, 1998, at 5:45 in the evening, 20,000 people gathered downtown and watched the tallest building ever imploded come down in 30 seconds. People wept in the street. They were not crying for a building. 15 stores. Add up the years, and it comes to more than 1,000 years of Saturdays. The lunch counters where you learned to spin a stool. The escalators you rode just to ride. The clerk who knew your name, your size, and your mother. We tell ourselves it was just retail, that something better replaced it. But nothing replaced the eagle. Nothing replaced the organ at closing time or the popcorn machine by the door. We traded 10,000 small kindnesses for a lower price, and we never got a receipt. So here is where you come in. Which of these stores did you walk through with your own 2 feet? What did your town lose that this list missed? Tell me below. I read every single one. And if this brought back a Saturday you had forgotten, pass it on to someone who was there beside you.